Greetings, lovers of lore. Thank you for joining me for the second installment of the Streets of New Capenna side stories. This one focuses on the Obscura crime family, and our story will be following Camille and Quesa. Camille is the right hand of the leader of the Obscura and is essentially a spy master, and Quesa is her protege. So, the story starts out at Tivet's fortune teller shop. And this is a place that is openly aligned with the Obscura. It shows their family symbol right up on the wall as a sign of loyalty. And at this point in the story, Camille and Quesa are essentially just passing through. This is one of the locations that Camille has as part of her spy network. So she's got a secret tunnel located in the back of the shop. While they're there, Tivet, who is a very friendly sphinx with a big white body and a golden crown on his head, he is basically just bantering with them. And Quesa, being the friendly individual she is, she wants to stay for some tea and to have her fortune read. But unfortunately, Camille says that they're too busy. Quesa, being playful, turns to Tivet and says, "Is there any chance in the future that Camille will lighten up?" And Tivet, being the fun dude that he is, plays right back, "I see you dealing with an angry boss." But the joke gets interrupted when basically what happens is Tivet ends up with these lightning seizures, right? Roaring out at the top of his voice, seizing up with lightning. The crystals in his shop start to shatter. There's a hurricane of smoke and multiple voices are actually coming out of Tivet's mouth. It's absolutely insane. So, Camille, being the spy master that she is, uses magic to capture what's going on. She floats a recording sphere out into the air and captures the entirety. And Tivet starts to bellow out very specific things. "Kitten hiding in the cream, corvidae flitting and pecking, gold in the water, hiding the cream, the kitten." The room started to get way too bright as massive power starts to shake it and slam things around. And suddenly what's happening ends as Tivet just collapses to the ground, right? Now, Quesa has spent her time studying the original visions that were given to Rafine at the founding of New Capenna. And Quesa says that basically this sort of vision here is identical to those ancient visions. So Camille goes ahead and sends the recording of what's happened back to Rafine, who is the Sphinx leader of the Obscura, right? And at the same time, she has a magic amulet which draws in reports from all kinds of other members because, again, she is the spy master, right? So many reports are coming in that the amulet almost can't handle it. It starts to shake and gyrate, like going absolutely nuts to the point where she has to like snap it open before it explodes. And massive amounts of reports, wave after wave, of people saying the exact same thing happened with seers all across the city, right? And this actually triggers Quesa to pull this little talisman full of halo out of her pocket and start to rub it. And Camille looks over it and basically just waves it away as ridiculous superstition. The angels are gone from New Capenna, so believing somehow that they're going to help is a foolish thing to do in her perspective. So at this point, Camille and Quesa are summoned back to the Cloud Spire. Camille goes off to meet with Rafine, while Quesa is sent essentially to the map room to try and pinpoint out the different locations and see if there's any connections that might have been missed, because Quesa has a really good eye for detail, right? So what happens is Camille goes in and talks with the demon sphinx Rafine, and Rafine's setup is amazing, right? At the top of the Cloud Spire, covered in all of these magical wards with stained glass windows that depict Rafine basically rising to power, making a pact with the demon lords, and like the founding of Capenna. So a really epic setup in terms of where Rafine rules from, and I would love to see it in person, right? The idea of a sphinx joining up with demons to gain boosts and power to their visionary power is really neat, right? And on top of all that, you have all these different images that are floating around in the room as well. So basically, Rafine is constantly in contact with all these different sources of information and prophecy, so that Rafine is all-knowing, right? That's actually one of the things that Camille is jealous of, because as a spy master, Camille is way into collecting information, and Rafine, as a seer, has access to information that Camille could never get, right? So it makes sense, that level of jealousy. Now, Camille has built a habit of only telling Rafine, like, facts. No speculation, just the utter truth. So basically, at this point, Rafine wants a report. Camille is saying, we're mapping out where the visions happened. There is a pattern. She starts to say what the prophecy is, but Rafine just cuts her off. Yeah, I know. Kittens and milk, gold in the water, and halo. What I want to know is who sent this vision. And that is a big moment for Camille, where she's, wait a minute, sent? This was sent? So yeah, Rafine explains that essentially this is coming from an outside origin, and from Rafine's perspective, this is actually an attack on the obscura future seers, right? So Camille is really concerned because Camille was responsible as Rafine's right-hand woman for ensuring Rafine's safety, and as a result, Camille was the one who put all of the magical wards on the Cloud Spire. Now, those wards have failed, right? A message like that shouldn't be able to make it through to Rafine, which shows that Camille's magic has not succeeded properly, and this is a big problem for her. But Rafine is saying, you need to find answers, you need to find them fast. You are the only one that I trust. So Camille joins back up with Quasar in the map room, right? And that's where they start to discuss things further. Every single seer that got a vision works specifically for the Obscura. Even the secret agents that work for the Obscura without knowing they're working for the Obscura. So the Obscura have certain fortune tellers who basically are in the employ of the Obscura, but have no concept of it. And even those agents were fed this particular vision. So that is a very interesting point. It's not affecting any organization outside of the Obscura, right? And Quasar at that point starts talking about the vision images, and Camille just waves it off. Forget it. We're not actually analyzing the images this time around. What we need to do is find the sender. And again, Quasar has the same kind of reaction that Camille did to finding out these were sent visions. It's a very troubling thing. So what happens at that point is Quasar, without even really thinking about it, ends up taking out her talisman and like talking about the angels of New Capenna again, to Camille's frustration. And at this point, she basically goes, all right, you know what? I'm done with your nonsense here. Give me that talisman. Okay. I'm finished with this nonsense. We've got to get this done. Rafine has told us what to do. So hand over your talisman and stop with the angel nonsense, please, right? So Quasar doesn't really want to, but obeys her commanding officer, and they continue onwards. So they start to look into what happened before the attack, and they find out that within an hour before that actual blast of magic hit all the different seers, there was an explosion in the Mezio, specifically in an abandoned warehouse. And investigating further, they found out that there was one person in that area at the time, and that was Lacey Lanine. She is essentially a fluff news reporter for the Capenna Herald, right? So, is she the kitten hiding the cream in the prophecy? That's the idea they're looking at, right? So they go, okay, let's look further into this warehouse, right? They're using analyzing magic to figure out what's going on and reaching out to other contacts. So Camille contacts Oscar, who actually, now that I think about it, is like an Oscar the Grouch character. He resides in like trash-filled areas. He digs through people's trash, goes through the sewers and stuff. He does distasteful things that other people wouldn't appreciate, but as a result, he totally does gain useful information. So Oscar is able to let them know that the building wasn't abandoned. In fact, based on the trash that's around in the location, people had been staying there for about a week. And on top of that, he goes further to say that it wasn't actually an explosion, it was an implosion. And while he's there talking to them, he notices Quasar and said, hey, I found 2 stained glass halos for you. Camille questions it and goes, what's this nonsense about halos here? And Quasar basically says, look, I am paid to notice things. This is my job, and these halos are literally just appearing. Stained glass halos are appearing in like glass windows in New Capenna, with absolutely no explanation. So Camille just nods, yeah, we are paying you to investigate sort of things, and just kind of waves it away. They've got more important stuff to do. So they head over to the newspaper to basically interview the owner of the newspaper, Denry, and say, what's the deal here, bro? And they find out, yep, Lacey is just a small-time reporter, but she's looking for a big scoop. By talking to the guy in charge of the paper, they can see that they don't really care about Lacey's abilities. They just consider her a nothing reporter. So they just piece together, wait a minute, she must be looking for a big scoop to try and make her way out of this. So is she just finding this big scoop? Is she somehow maybe connected into it, right? But ultimately, Lacey isn't at the newspaper, and when they ask the owner where she might be, says maybe she's out with her friend Lagrella. Now this throws up some red flags right there, right? Because Camille is like, wait a minute, Lagrella's a well-known broker, and she doesn't really have friends. So if she's involved, something else is going on. And then they bring echo readers into the warehouse, and these are people who can read the traces of what has happened, specifically through magic. So through their divinations, they learn that there was a 4-person team inside this warehouse, but all 4 of those people were actually ensorcelled. So they had been taken over with magic, right? And this 4-person team had been casting dozens of spells towards this bottle. And there's a bottle in the middle of the room. They had been casting dozens of spells at this for an entire week. And every single spell failed until today. And when that spell went off, it consumed absolutely everything in the room, including the wizards that were there and the building itself. And then shadows blasted outwards. That would be the visions that were being sent, right? So they lean further into it and determine, was Lacey here? And it's like, yes, Lacey was here on the first night of this week. I have to admit, the Echo Reader's magic is genuinely impressive in terms of what it can determine. So Lacey was there for the first night of the week, and she showed up with a halo bottle. And this is more evidence to make it, wait a minute, is she trying to set up her own story here? So at that point, they actually consider hiring a ruiner. A ruiner is somebody who literally will just absolutely ruin your reputation. So they go out and drag your name through the mud to the point where no one will want to work with you. Kind of stuff you could actually see on the internet happening right now, right? So they basically consider hiring one of those, but they discard that idea, right? Now, Camille has extra concerns because the more she thinks about it, the more she realizes that one bottle of Halo shouldn't be enough power to be able to break through those strong wards that she put on the Cloud Spire. But those thoughts are put aside because they end up actually locating Lacey. Somebody had wiped her mind and put her in a dumpster. Well, actually, it's not sure if somebody wiped her mind. They're not sure. The wiping can't be undone, and it actually applies to everything. The notepad she was carrying, her business card, even a scroll she was holding. They're all just cleared off. There's no text on them. Her mind has been wiped, and they're wondering if perhaps being at the point-blank range when that magic blast happened, maybe that wiped her mind, right? Now, the area that they're in at this point in the story actually happens to be right by Tivit's shop. Again, this time it's not a good time at Tivit's shop because it explodes outwards. Glass and wood and everything rain down upon the street. They find Tivit out front of the shop. Now, he's hopping around in a panic, obviously. This is his home and his livelihood, right? So he's there. Quasar ends up running up, but Camille hangs back a little and notices that there's this big balcony overhanging that's literally about to collapse and crush them because it's caught on fire. So quick thinking by Camille, she whips out tendrils of magic, grabs both Tivit and Quasar, and yanks them back. And not a moment too soon because the balcony comes crashing down where they had just been. But then Camille realizes to her dismay, she didn't grab Quasar. The magic just grabbed Quasar's coat. And she can see that Quasar has to be under the rubble because Oscar has run up and he's just pulling up the rubble going, no, 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 no. But then, luckily, they open up a little gap in the rubble and Quasar just pops herself right out the hole because guess what? Cephalids ain't got no bones, son. She's like a boneless chicken wing and she just slides on out the hole with no problem. So that was a fun little tense moment that ended in an enjoyable way, right? I definitely thought that was amusing, the whole. And when she comes out, she goes, got no bones, boss? Which, I mean, come on, Camille, You're a cephalid as well. Shouldn't you really know that too, right? Whatever. Anyways, you've got this situation where they've gone through this massive explosion, right? So what happens when something like this occurs is the brokers show up. And sure enough, broker agents start showing up. What they do in these scenarios is they go, hey, we can help you out in this dangerous situation. Just sign this contract saying you'll do us a favor in the future. So they act kind of like vultures, right? So they're showing up here. They're trying to sign different people up to things. But what really gets noticed by Camille is that one of these vultures is trying to sign Tivit to a contract. And Tivit is like in shock and dazed because of what's just happened to him, right? But Quasar sees it happening, uses some magic to lift up a fragment of a mirror shard that's laying on the ground, and then zooms it over between them. And it turns out that when it comes to broker's magic, if you use mirrors, you can find the loopholes within them and reflect their magic back upon them, right? So basically, that's what Camille teaches to Quasar at that point, because Quasar wasn't really aware of it. So they get back to talking about what's actually going on. They start talking about the stained glass halos again, because one showed up at Tivit's shop too. So they start to investigate that concept. And Quasar is way more interested in the halos, right? But Camille, who's rattled from what's happened and frustrated with her apprentice here because she feels like she's not doing a good job, it's like, can you stop? Can you stop with the angels? You've got, like, we're done with this. I'm tired of your folktales. We're finished. We're not doing this anymore. It's making you sloppy. And then basically, Quasar freaks out. She's like, listen, Camille, you have your own blind spots, okay? Don't act like you're perfect. Why aren't you questioning Rafine? You're questioning every seer but one? Does that make any sense? And at that point, Camille loses her cool and goes, Quasar, you're off the case. Give me your gear. And Quasar gives her her gear with this huffy, fine. And then Camille turns her back in the traditional way of letting her know, we're done, you're off the case, you're forgotten, we're moving on. So at that point, that's when Camille goes back by herself to Rafine and starts to explain everything that she's learned, right? Rafine is relieved by getting this report. And then at the same time, Camille gets a report from her spy network. So basically what happened was when the Cloud Spire wards failed, she sent somebody to investigate. I want a thorough, like full-on check every single ward that I've put up. So the report comes back. All the wards are exactly the way they were. There's nothing wrong with the wards. And so Camille, as the one who made the wards, now has an extra level of what is going on in her mind. And then she realizes what this has to mean. It means Rafine didn't get the vision. Rafine said that the kittens were splashing in milk, not hiding the cream, right? So basically, this is a situation where Rafine was left out, and Rafine is scared because she doesn't know what's going on because she didn't get the vision, right? So Rafine gets really affronted by Camille bringing this up, right? At this point, is basically getting really worked up, but Camille manages to calm Rafine down and say, we can sort this out sort of scenario, and realizes, wait a minute, Lacey's mind wasn't wiped by that spell. It has to be Lagrella. So what happens is, at that point, Camille tracks down Lagrella, finds her at Mergino Fountain, and starts to, basically, Lagrella, congratulations, you found me. And Camille is like, how could I not? You're incredibly sloppy. Lagrella's like, what are you talking about? And Camille says, come on now. A building breaks, and you have a ton of brokers showing up for a tiny explosion, right? An entire building implodes, an entire building disappears, and not a single broker shows up to sign anybody to a contract? You don't think that screams your involvement? That is very, very plain, right? It's so clearly obvious. How could you even try and pretend otherwise, right? Now, while they're having this conversation, Lagrella is slowly, like, weaving magic around Camille without her really noticing at first. So it's kind of like pooling up around her feet during the conversation, slowly moving up her arms or whatever, right? And as they're talking, discusses that basically the Cabretti are the ones who have found a new source of halo. They are the kittens hiding the cream, right? And at this point, the magic is moved even further around Camille, and Lagrella goes on, I only care about my fish tank and the prophecy. Her fish tank is this gigantic tank that is decorated with golden statues that aren't actually statues. They're people encased in gold and silver. Anybody who breaks a contract with Lagrella gets turned into a statue in her fish tank. So she goes on to explain that there is a prophecy. A demon foretold that the city of New Capenna would be destroyed when all the halo is gone, and Lagrella will do anything it takes to stop that from happening. So she seizes Camille with her magic and makes a contract appear in front of her. A contract that will erase Camille's mind. So essentially, she's using the magic to force Camille's signature on the contract. And Camille is horrified. It's basically a broker forcing a contract? What's even going on here? Lagrella's obviously just, hey, I will do whatever it takes to make this happen, right? So it gets to the point where like Lagrella's basically laid out an entire plan. She's admitted everything she's done. She's just about to force Camille to sign the contract. And then when Camille's hand reaches the contract just disappears. And Camille goes, did you catch all that, Quesa? It turns out this was a sting operation. So the room, the fountain disappears. They're actually in a empty room that they have tricked Lagrella into. She thought she was in the fountain room, basically in the fountain area, I should say, because of illusion magic. Quesa had used recording magic to capture everything that Lagrella had said, and also was using mirror bits to basically undo and reflect Lagrella's magic back to her. So by using the combination of mirror reflection of the broker's magic and using their cephalid illusion magic, they were essentially, basically, they were able to maneuver Lagrella into a position where now she's bound by her own magic and her hand is above her own contract. She's about to be forced to sign a contract to wipe her own mind. And she's basically yelling at them, free me! And it's like, we're only going to free you if you nullify the contract you have with Lacey. So ultimately, if you look at it underneath, Camille and Quesa are good people. They don't have to help Lacey out in this situation. She's just a fluff reporter for a news agency, right? She's not a part of their organization, but they have the right morals. So they're like, hey, you know what? We're going to help her out here. So basically, Lagrella is I refuse. I will never nullify a contract. And then the magic just makes her hand get closer and closer to the contract as sweat's beating up on her forehead. And then she's like, fine, and agrees to nullify the contract. And that's when Camille and Quaid's like, okay, thanks. And they just peace out. And Lagrella's left there going, you can't leave me like this. Free me. And then she just calls back as she's walking away. She's like, it's your magic. Free yourself. I love it. I love it. So that is a very fun side story from Streets of New Capenna. A lot of action going on in there. Really makes you like Camille and Quesa. They're enjoyable. And I really enjoyed that, like, getting crushed by the wall, boop, popping out a hole part. So let me know your thoughts. Big thank you to all of the patrons of this channel for supporting what we do here. I'll see you soon with some more lore, my friends. And in the meantime, remember, lore is life.